Okay, that should be live. Oh man, need to get some sticky pads and get my chair mat held down to the floor a bit better. Pardon me, keeps rolling back. What dev? What we are looking at. Hi Lux, how you doing? Welcome. How is your day going? So I've been working on getting the bot working the last couple of days, trying to get PubSub with event hooks working, and Twitch, depending on the event you're subscribing to, Twitch requires you to give a different authentication token. And it's an absolute pain the way I've got it set up, so I'm having to redo that. But that's not what today's stream is. I'm just trying to clean up a little bit so I don't leave anything messy. Okay, so today's stream. On Thursday when we left it, we were talking about changes and all sorts of stuff, and one of the things that it highlighted was the fact that my workflows right now are kind of transactionally poor. I would say is a good term for it. So if a part of the workflow fails, what should happen, right? I've published events, or I've dogs are being particularly difficult today. I've published events, so I've told the world things happen, but then they roll back or they fail, and I've got no control over that. So, thank you for the follow, Lux. Appreciate it. So, how do we change that? How do we correct for that, or at least be able to roll that back? And it was well timed because Milan posted on YouTube yesterday morning, I believe it was, a video on doing interceptors in EF Core. Now, he'd done a video a while ago on EF Core interceptors. I'm pretty certain it was him. So I mistook it for that. But basically, it's exactly what we kind of need. Kind of. He hooks it into domain events, so publishing domain events off of entities. So his entity, his aggregate, and the events that occur in it are kind of all in one, right? So you save the aggregate, and the aggregate publishes the event, sort of thing. So as it saves. So I'm not sure we're going to get to that solution, but we will get to a solution that works for what I'm doing right now without crossing that bounds and starting to put labels on things that I'm not comfortable doing. So yeah, that's that. And Dota, you said in Discord you had an aha moment. Speaking is difficult this morning, it seems. Yeah. I was talking to a guy that makes high-speed trading software. Okay. They only remove features from their software. Nice. Rewrite the software every 2 years completely. only thing they're working on is speed/performance of the trades. Okay. Which made me think about how hard it is to get a redesign through. And should I really be trying to continually add more features to the software we make? I'm interested in seeing where this point's going. So, do you pick a topic similar to performance to improving the software? Okay. Let's get this lined up in the meantime. So, okay. Okay, so do you pick a topic similar to performance to improving the software? The one reason the user picks your solution essentially, for high-speed trading, the fastest market maker gets the sale. For your Agile software, I'm not sure what the overall purpose of the software is, and it's user-dependent. The overall purpose of the software. Why would a manager use the software? Okay. I've learned to wait on your text because I often jump into something before actually trying to and oftentimes overlap with you a bit. So, overall purpose of my software is it's actually not a bad idea to try and to define what it is I'm trying to do, right? So obviously the simple thing is project management, right? It's I want to be able to visualize and track the work and planning that goes into creating things, right? In my narrow focus software. Yeah. So the difference, which I think is what is most important here, is the visibility of that information, right? The speed at which people are told about things and the visibility, the ability to visualize where things really lie, is kind of where my focus is on. Yeah. That's the difference, right? So what I'm trying to do is build a software similar to all the others, right? Similar to all the other project management tools. But I want to make sure that people can be told about things and be aware of things without having to go and ask somebody all the time, right? If work is sat waiting because another team has dependency, a team has a dependency on another team and them to do the work, that piece of work is not a different piece of work. It is the same piece of work just assigned to that team, sort of thing, right? That's the plan. That's the path I want to go down, because it is the same piece of work if there's a dependency, and I want to make sure that the people involved all know where that is. So there is no, hey, can you go and chase this? Can you go and look up why they haven't done this yet, right? So developers in this case are the users of the software. Yeah, for the most part. I mean, other people use Jira that aren't software developers. I'm not. So one thing I'm not going to say is this is going to replace Trello, right? Because Trello is a good ticketing system, a good work tracking system for simple things. Zendesk and all those others are good ticketing systems, and they do them well. Right? Yeah, managers are sponsors, the ones that want it. Yeah. Essentially, managers. Yeah. Sorry. So I'm not going to say this is going to be a ticketing system on, a perfect ticketing system. It's going to be a ticketing system focused on those cases that work is a little bit more than just a bug fix, right? Which there are plenty of. Okay. So we're going to use sample database for this one, not the actual full database. So I mean, the ability to rewrite a system every couple of years is, I assume that's through necessity, right? That's through the absolute need to get, sorry, to get the fastest possible software. Well, you have to develop ridiculously good testing because you have to be able to confirm that you haven't reverted or you haven't regressed on any behaviors from the previous version. So, well, because if you have to change the code or there's a new rule or there's something else in there, you've got to go and maintain those tests. I would imagine it's going to be quite a sticking point. Because I suppose your tests do get in the way because you're now reversing. For some reason, the dogs are being very unsettled today. Yeah. Because now you got me thinking about that. How do you switch out the software and keep the tests the same? They've been on a walk. Yeah, they've been out this morning. Just it's a Saturday morning. They kind of know it. The schedule's off. I might have to go out and take them out for a minute. Yeah. So we'll give it a second. So yeah, but you have to recreate the tests. That's what I was saying. The structure of that code drastically changing for new things. I mean, it does. It sounds like that could be quite an exciting environment to work in from a a technology standpoint, but it sounds like that could be a high stress role to be in, purely because the software is changing and you don't have the luxury of screwing it up, right? And you will have deadlines. Mm-hmm. So as fun as it is to be on the bleeding edge of the software all the time, and I would imagine they're not on bleeding edge because that adds inherent risk. You are constantly being pushed to learn, to grow, to do all sorts of things, but you're expected to do it on someone else's timeline, not your own. So if you don't grasp something or you don't use the technology properly, it will show. Holes will show quickly. challenges of I'll make sure that people know I am streaming in the house. I don't have to worry about other people in the house. Okay, so yeah, I would imagine that the tests would get in the way because your tests are built on the previous version of software. You're changing the software. You're not just changing a little bit of it or maintaining it. You're not adding band-aids, and I suppose that really does help in terms of clearing up assumptions. So one of the things that I want to do in the platform, right, is constantly accept that right now I have the opportunity to remove things, to change things, to break things. Sorry, I cannot clear that in my throat. So the ability to swap things out is critical. Well, because you can't, I would imagine you can't develop it that fast, right? But that software is not featured. Yeah, it's gold driven, I suppose. It's got one purpose. So features. Let's actually talk about features, right? So I'm assuming that I know everything about this process, right? I'm not really, but I'm just, let's for the sake of argument say I'm assuming I know everything about Agile project management, about taking these stories, these tickets, etc., promoting them, the things that are necessary. I've already seen customizations requested for that sort of software, right? I've seen how Jira makes it flexible to add new swim lanes, how Jira makes it so you can add labels, you can add fields, you can add all sorts of stuff, because people don't just take what is out of the box. They want to make it their own. And what happens with software is, this is why it's very important, if you can, to sorry, I have a little bit of like a grain stuck at the back of my throat and it's tickling my throat. That's why I keep coughing. My apologies. If you can look at your software through your user's eyes, that's a really useful thing to do. You know, I always, and I've said it before, I know that, but I've always said that you should try and go and watch your users use your software in their daily environment, right? If you're building, like we were building field service software, right? So mobile applications for technicians. It was useful to go out with the technicians and see how they used the software we'd written in their day-to-day. Now, in some cases, they used it while they were doing the job. In other cases, they used it when they got back outside and finished up, and they kind of did it all through memory, right? But it was the process that the company implied on them that told them how to do that, or rather, the company expected them to follow a process, and that was how they were going to achieve following that process and staying with the bounds of what they were asked to do. But oftentimes, that runs against their natural way of doing things. So if you're talking about productivity, who defines what productive is, right? Each person has different ways of doing things. So seeing your users actually use your software can tell you a lot about, is it working? Is it doing what it should do? What do I need to add, right? And it's kind of one of the benefits I will have. I would imagine I will not struggle to find some people who are willing to test this platform when it gets to a good phase, right? Beyond just tinkering with it, right? I believe there's people out there all the time that would look for this sort of software, and a early access version that has been tested by someone who uses the software and is using it day to day, right? Because even through my testing, even through working with it myself, and building my software on it, I will understand the limitations. Yeah. The side project, it's not like you guys are going to pick it up and say, hey, this works perfect for us, because you're not going to realize the benefits of it, right? This is not aimed at being a small project. Now, I do aim to make the kind of ticket board / Kanban board have some features to support. I want to see if I can plug it in so that I can make it actually part of the stream, so that you're able to see the boards. But we'll see how that goes. And I don't want to spend too much time diverting myself onto something that's just a niche feature, right? But it would be kind of cool to be able to say, hey, you know, this is the public board, right? And I think that is actually a feature of Trello does have kind of public boards, right? Because you can actually look at the Apex Legends has their Trello board, well, a version of their work public, right? And I think Unreal as well. But anyway, that's not the point. The point is, you don't know how your software is going to get used. That was where I was heading there, right? You don't know the things that people are going to do, that they want to adapt your process, your software to their process, not the vice versa, right? So oftentimes when you're developing software, you're developing it in a little bit of a bubble. You know, someone's giving you some expectation of how something should work, and you go off and do it based upon what you've been told. You don't know if that's actually what was necessary, right? You're trusting the fact that your product management team and the managers above you have asked the right questions. And sometimes seeing that in reality is not always the case. I've met a lot of people who have basically made it their wish list. Like, what do they think would be cool in the software? Not what would work. What would be cool in the software? What would set it aside as a sales value? But those features aren't often the ones that people actually want. So for me, my selling point is the goal for my selling point, rather, is pure visibility, right? I need to take a quick break. Ads are about to start. I'll start them early. I will be right back, though. Okay. See if we can't get something done. My apologies. Hopefully that ad break gives a little bit longer. So the benefit of running ads, and I've seen a lot of streams really starting to add comments now to or notifications. The benefit of running the ads is that Twitch is going to run them anyway, and at least with ads run, anyone joining the stream avoids pre-rolls for a certain amount of time. So it does allow people to get into content sooner, even if it feels a little bit, yeah. Okay, so we're gonna have user and follow. A user is going to be bullet string name. So it's allowed me to name a project like this, but it's not done the it's not named the namespace in an actual usable way, which is amusing. Yeah, that should work. There you go. The heck? Don't know what it did to that. Interesting. So follow is just a linking table in this design. I'm just doing this because no, public int user ID, public int follows user ID. Worry about the actual differences later. This is just a simple schema that I have on hand that allows me to just tinker with this without getting involved in the actual full application. Okay, so we're gonna have some wrong namespaces there. That's that. That's that. Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a DB context that's going to connect to this database. It's then we're going to save something. We're going to apply an interceptor and publish an event from that interceptor. That's the goal. Milan, in his video, talks about domain events, right? And he's talking about this object having domain events, right? So this has a list of the events on it, right? Which is the domain events. And when saving, he says, okay, now go through and get all the domain events that have happened on that thing and publish them, right? But to do that, we'd have to make this a domain object, and that starts to get into some I understand how to do that, but I don't know that I want to get down into that path necessarily. Basically, the more I do this, the more I'm finding that I'm going to end up aligning some of my verbiage at some point to other design, to other architectures / patterns / whatever. So I'm gonna have to be careful because I don't want to misrepresent how I'm writing the code. But ultimately, we're going to put in an interceptor and we're going to see if we can get it to publish something when it saves. So this is going to be the application DB context. And the reason I just used the Blazor app is because it gives us some visuals and we can actually put some pieces in place to application context. Let's add entity framework. And SQL Server. We know our SQL Server. So we have database objects, database principles, sample login. Where did this come from? Open. Blazor app 1. No. Maybe. Nope. Did I delete it? When you have so many little sample side projects that you forget the thing you're after. Specification demonstration, that might be it. This is it. Okay. So that was for this benefit. Hey Apex. Not bad. Getting some progress already. How are you doing? Let's get a better organized desk or a bigger desk space to play with. I'm gonna keep doing this streaming and yeah. Nice. I didn't forget about the stuff yesterday. I fell asleep on the sofa. So yeah. I made a big dinner and then fell asleep on the sofa. So I will look at I had a bit of wine as well. I had a glass of wine with dinner, and yeah, I was a bit more tired than I realized, I think. We had some chicken to use, so I put a load of spices and garlic and stuff on it and marinated it overnight on Thursday night, and then kind of baked that last night, and then we had some potatoes to use, so I peeled all them and then split them off into 3 different things. I made chips in the air fryer, or fries in the air fryer, then made mashed potato and split the mashed potato off into one bowl, and then the others I added paprika, garlic, a bit of salt and pepper, and some corn flour, rolled them into balls, and then put them in the air fryer and made like potato pops. So we had chicken with potatoes 3 ways. There's a lot of food. So yeah. Application context. Actually, I do like how, so if we do this way, right, I do like how default constructors change this. It does make it a little neater. Or primary constructors, not default constructors. Yeah, it was, you make the mashed potato, or rather you boil the potatoes and kind of mash them with everything in. And I added paprika and, like I said, garlic, garlic, a bit of garlic, salt and garlic. And then corn flour or cornstarch to give them a nice crispy edge, and then put them in the air fryer, and they were delicious. Oh, then I made garlic butter and poured it over the top of them, so they soak up the garlic butter. And my daughter, who was not interested in trying them, tried to eat most of them. So, yes. Now this is interesting. So what this has done is actually use the fact that I've done this before, right, in a different project, and I've put navigational properties on these. So watch this. So that's what it's actually wanting, right? But that's trying to navigate that. So that's, yeah. So that's a navigational property. That's not. Huh. That's interesting that it's actually filled that in for me. And then virtual followers, follow user ID. As did I misname that when I created it based on what I'd done previously? Follows user, followers. No, I'd done that. So it kind of interpreted it a little bit there. So that gives us the DB context. We've obviously got some data. So let's just verify we have some data. So we'll go to the home page here. We're in Blazor, so actually let's go here first instead of the database. That will help. Builder.services.add SQL server. No, add entity framework. What? Where does that come from? Is that a new extension? Okay, we'll worry about that afterwards. Add DB context. Add pool DB context factory, I think it is I want. Application context. Configure. Or configure.use SQL server. And then we're going to do builder.configuration. Get connection string sample. Log to debug. Debug. Right line. Is it? Yeah, right line. Well, that doesn't like that because that doesn't match the. That's just a string outputter, right? So that's just an easy way of seeing all your SQL and stuff generated. Normally I'd put this behind a if debug, right? Something like that. Can't do it that way. That would break because the moment I'm not in debug, this line won't terminate properly. But you can do something similar. That's my point. That should add the context. So now we should be able to inject our context into our page, or rather inject the factory. Private I db factory of application context. So that I don't have any real problems with Blazor, but what I don't particularly like is a lot of the examples show the database right up in this area, because this is not the client, right? This is still the server, but the separation between the two is blurred. So that's normally my biggest problem with Blazor is that users, and it doesn't matter for this example. It doesn't matter that I am doing this, but that's kind of the problem, right? It's I'm demonstrating how to use Blazor by doing what I'm doing, and this is not the right way to use Blazor. So yeah, okay. So if users are equal to null, it wants to help me out all the way there. Thanks for the look, Apex. Appreciate it. If user is not equal to null, then for each var user in users div, that'll do. Class equals mt4. Let's do that. Okay, so if we run this up, so for those joining, what I'm working on is just kind of prototyping out some interceptor behavior for EF Core. Basically, when I save something in the database, I want to be able to trigger events, which will tell me I can now safely do other things. So this would be post-save. The benefit of that is that I can, right now in my existing application, I'm publishing events, assuming that everything went through fine. If it didn't go through fine, those events are now lies. Cannot access a disposed context instance. Okay, so that is caused by the fact. No, it's not caused by the fact. Why is that? Why are you? So that should get me an instance of the factory. And it wants it that way. I mean, that's essentially the same thing. But that's two lists. So I shouldn't be accessing a disposed instance. Nothing in there says that should be this. That should be Sorry, I'm a fidget naturally, but I realize there's a camera in front of me, and I kind of slouch back when I'm thinking. And I realize that you don't want to look at the top of my big curly head. And also, the mat I'm on is moving further towards the desk every time I fidget. Anyway, it's not why we're here. So, is that it didn't get a connection in the first place? Oh, hold on. No relationship from follow to user has been configured by convention because there are multiple points in entity type. Let's first determine if that's actually the problem. We don't need any of this, right? To do this. Right? We don't need these. We don't need these. We don't need the navigation properties at all for the purpose of this demonstration. Yep, no worries, Dota. Thank you. Kurong, hi, I'm on YouTube. My apologies if I didn't see that message earlier. Hope you're well. Thank you for stopping by. Appreciate it. For those that don't know, I am streaming on Twitch and YouTube at the same time. All the videos, all the streams get uploaded to YouTube. And the link is in the panels below on Twitch. Well, once more. Now I've removed those dependencies. Nope. So it's not an artifact of the... Why is this? And if you have any questions, any thoughts or opinions on what I'm doing, if you see I'm doing something totally wrong, please feel free. I'm not perfect. I'm a human and I make mistakes. So I don't think that's the problem, because I think pooled DB context factory was added for Blazor. I remember a lot of issues with this early on. Okay, that changes the behavior, doesn't it? The entity type user requires a primary key to be defined. That's interesting. I thought pooled DB context factory was added for Blazor, but that clearly changes the behavior, doesn't it? Okay, so let's add them back in now and see if those navigation properties will work. The entity type user requires a primary key. That's what I was saying. So user does have a primary key, right? The problem there is this. Yeah, this hasn't defined it. Model builder entity user has key. Here goes to k dot. That's got to add it in. When you're defining the model, helps to add it in. So for those watching on Twitch, ads will run every 30-ish minutes. Why they're running now, I don't know. But if you do get an ad and you are paying attention to what I'm doing, please just feel free to say, and I will pause what I'm doing. Data is null. This method or property cannot be null. Data is null. It's interesting. So we're getting very wildly different behavior here. Data is null. Let's have a look. Context.users. Got the right model. SQL null. This method. So either I've got a mapping that's wrong. There we go. That's why. I didn't put those fields in the original. Okay, so there's our users finally, right? Styling's all busted, but we don't worry about that. I'm not worrying about making it look good. I'm trying to make sure that it's actually going to give me what I want, right? So we have a list of users. Now that just highlighted a challenge with Blazor. If and there's a Boolean you can use, so that actually executed twice. And there's a Boolean you can use, and I can't remember what it's called right now. Blazor. Firing. You just earned a subscriber, my friend. Thank you very much. Sorry, the font is small. How do I say your name? Ro. I'm gonna shorten it. Roites? I'm not sure. My apologies. Event firing. How do I turn this? Blazor is loaded. Actually, Blazor firing uninitialized twice. Blazor lifecycle methods. This is a Boolean value we can look at, I'm pretty certain. First render. Okay. If first render. So that should avoid that firing multiple times, right? There's no suitable. So on initialize, on after render. But it fired this twice. It fired on initialized. We saw it, right? I mean, again, this isn't going to block me from doing what I'm trying to do here. It's more the irritation and obviously the chance to learn. I haven't used Blazor. Okay, no, that did only fire once. Okay. I'm not sure why it hit a second time before, so that was a... But that point still matters, right? On the rendering stuff, you do get told the first time and then a subsequent time, so it will fire twice. So if you put stuff in on rendering, you need to be aware that that first render exists. So we've got users. We've got something to do now, right? Changing data. I'm not going to do anything drastic here. What I'm going to do is, hi Amal, how are you doing? Welcome. What I'm going to do is, I'm not going to put any forms. I'm not going to mess around trying to build all that sort of stuff out. What I'm going to do is I'm going to basically make a button that changes a piece of data, fires an event, and we get to see, is that going to do what we want it to do? And we're going to focus our energies on the EF Core Interceptor. And again, the way that I'm going to use this in the main application is probably something like Something outside main project. Not quite. This is prototyping around the main project. So if you remember on Thursday, we were talking about changes and general architecture stuff, right? And Essa raised a concern, and actually I'll jump to that piece of code because it does matter. Open liquid sky. Okay, so we have this workflow, and right now this piece is still hooked in here, but the user, right? So we register a tenant, then we fire off register tenant user, and in this one, when we fire off the registered tenant user, we add the tenant user, then we publish an event straight away. Hi Ezra, how are you doing? So this stuff, right? If this fails, if this rolls back, because I don't call save changes here actually, which is just that means that's by virtue of the transaction finishing that save changes happens, because that would normally fail to do what it needs to do. Huh, that's interesting that does work. But it definitely is working. We've been looking at this for weeks, right? But either way, this event firing, if that fails when we hit save changes, because the save will not happen here, right? It will not unless our Dallas has made it do the save in there, in which case that's why that's working, because it's using, that's why it's doing it. Our Dallas's override is calling save changes. That is not. So I mean that suggests that that's the desired behavior, but that's still a challenge because. Huh. Okay, let's put this back to where it should be, right? The reality is that any save on this, right? If that fails, the save change is happening. The fact that it happens in line right now is not kind of is we'll have to come back on, because if I was running a big if that was all part of a transaction, then this would still not necessarily do what I needed to do. But this publish should not happen, right? So pieces of the system would become inaccurate if I let it go through. Add a method called create tenant user. Well, again, we're moving towards domain objects there, right? Because then that's publishing the domain event. That's again why I'm a little afraid of. So I don't have an issue with the technique of doing the interceptor. That's not the problem, right? That's still useful, because this sort of stuff happening in part of the interceptor is fine, right? That's kind of why I'm prototyping it rather than just changing it. So if we go into here and start to make this, right, the actual, I mean, it would be kind of static or whatever. If we start to make this the domain object, then we cross into a realm that I'm not wholly comfortable going into, because that runs into I could be basically making up domain-driven design as I go, and making all the wrong mistakes. All the wrong mistakes. That sounds problematic, but what I mean there is all the problems that come with early understanding of domain-driven design in implementation. I understand the concept of domain-driven design. I do not understand how to apply it to a project in reality, right? If I start putting events, so in Milan's example, right, he has a collection called domain events on this thing because all the things have happened on here, right? So you publish tenant user was registered in here. Right. But that's a domain event. That's what he's using. So am I overlapping my description of how the system's working? Right. Yes, creating an abstract entity class. This does not mean domain-driven design. This is clean architecture, single responsibility. Well, those two are linked whether we like it or not. Clean architecture is DDD, or it's domain-driven in its focus. So this does beg the question, I'm using libraries that are intended to do something. Am I being forced down a path by using the libraries? Like I don't have any issue with learning a new way of doing it for me, right? I don't have any issue with growing. My fear is growing and falling onto pitfalls that I can avoid if I do things the way I would normally do them, right? So I can work around this design, right? I can work around the challenges this poses with normal techniques, right? And the interceptor does work from that publishing perspective. I can still make that work without hooking it into the actual entity, but the fact that the entity saves is the challenge there. So yes, you're correct in the right way to do this now would be to make this know how to create itself, register the domain event, and then when it's saved, it will publish its own domain event, right? So anyway, you create or you manipulate a tenant user, you have I think it's learning time, unfortunately, for me, because I have to make some choices here. Oh, it's always learning time. But a lot of these patterns, right? A lot of the things, right? A lot of the tooling is built around similar concepts. Clean architecture is built around DDD, right? You get into this is why the lines are blurred, right? This is why it's confusing because you get into event sourcing, you get into event driven, you get into DDD, you get into all these different things, and each each library is pulling little bits of what they think it should do, or each architecture, each design. But I can't avoid it if I want to use this, because this is guaranteed to always publish now, right? This is right now. My code is truth because this happened, which meant this happened. The only challenge I have is that shouldn't happen if any of this failed, right? Because if this fails now, that save has happened. So our data in register new tenant is done, right? Because in this instance, I use it here. So I send a command, that command goes and saves. When it comes back, I then publish, right? So there's a bit of a difference in behavior, which I understood. But this adds two things. So am I being forced down a design path because I've chosen to use a package? And do I understand enough about that design, that package? And this is just me kind of randomly thinking, but these are the challenges that you would generally have if you were working on this software, right? If you'd seen this cool library, and you'd implemented it, and then you realize you had some issues, what do you do next? Because you're kind of forced to learn something that you weren't expecting. And Milan's stuff, right? It is domain driven design, right? He is just deliberately, like, that is a focus, right? Those domain events are called domain events for a reason, right? Let's go and have a look. Nope. Go. Implementation style. Really? Whoa. Not what I want to see. There's no aggregate root value here. It only collects events within the base class and using an interceptor, but this process can also be done without using an interceptor. Yeah, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's this, right? But the core project should include the domain model, including things like aggregates, value objects, domain events. Yeah. Right. So he is. So project is an aggregate root, entity base, add item, create. So my concern is I'm now forced, if I want to use the library effectively, I am forced to do this a certain way. In a way that I haven't with the events. Hold on, how does that? Thank you. Thank you for the link. Right, this is without using the interceptor. Yeah, okay. I mean, it's essentially, this is what I've done before in past projects, right? I've overridden the save changes and then put in a, hey, you need to track changes, etc. Yeah. Entity domain events. So everything that gets saved has to inherit from entity or from a base class contributor. Only if save was successful, makes sense. So in the sample, we have a core, there's our contributor, there's our entity base, which has a name, guard against null. So how does that occur then? If that's just an entity. With update name, so contributor by ID spec, yeah, I get that. But the event is contributor deleted event. The main event is dispatched whenever a contributor is deleted. The delete contributor service is used to dispatch the delete contributor service. What? That's not. But that's not hooked into the aggregate at all. That's not. Am I suffering from misunderstanding what the word event means here? Or am I suffering from the sample doesn't reflect what the actual code does? See if the .NET 8 release changed anything, because that'll be a more recent version. No. 4 months ago. Main is, yeah, main is this one. Okay, so that's useless. Program. We had a context. We have our AppDB context using fast endpoints. We have projects. Let's go through a path. Create. Call mediator saying create project command. That'll be in use cases, projects, create. There's our create project command. There's our create project handler. So we create a new project that we add. Project is defined in where is project defined? I'm not winning today on this one. Repository, add sync, add it. So that's what I'm calling now, essentially, right? So a new project looks like what? That's a contributor. That's the web API side of things. That's there's our DB context with projects. There's our override still. Am I being dense? Is there just no model here that I'm seeing? Let me. There we go. Sampled core project aggregate. Okay, here we go. So there's project. There's project. Okay. So this is not. This is not what I want to do. Interesting organization. I kind of get it now, but I'm not sure I like it still. Create new project. We call repository add async new project. There is no event for created. We don't publish anything for a project being created. Okay. So if we go to mark to do item complete handler. Okay, so we go in here and we get the project and we go and get the to do items and we mark it complete on the aggregate. So we call mark complete on the aggregate here. So that's, so again, we are not avoiding DDD, right? But that is the, no, that's the project. The project has items attached to it, and we mark the item as complete. So, and then we update the entity. Okay, so when we update the to do item, mark complete. If it's not done, it's done registered domain event to do item complete. So registered domain event is on our entity base. Yeah, I'm not. That will be. Why is that claim based on registered domain event, and that's just registered domain event? That's just someone not doing what they should do. So we publish registered domain event. That's going to be in the core code. That's going to be down here somewhere. Core. Handlers. Why is contributor in the source code though? That upsets me. No, that has to be up here then. Why do we have a sample program that has things that are core, then overridden? Source. Another sample. This is let me go back up here. Thank you. Now are these forks of that? Or are they implementations of themselves? Main. So this is his own implementation of the same thing. Base entity. Yeah, it is. It's his own implementation. Okay. Okay, so yeah, that's exactly what I thought it would be. Gotcha. So I'm not trying to be contrary. I'm not trying to push back against the tide, right? That's not. Yeah, I get the concept. I'm not, and I really do appreciate all the links. That's very helpful. That is awesome. Thank you. But it does beg the question, right? I see a library, right? And this is exactly why I'm doing what I'm doing. I see a library. I think I can use that, and I get to a point. Welcome back, daughter. I get to a point, and I realize that my way of working is contrary to that library, because that library is very opinionated, actually, as it turns out, about how you should do things. So what does that mean for me now? Right? Do I continue using this library and kind of use it knowing that it's not going to work the way I expect it to work all the time? And I don't get some, I don't benefit from some there's some architectural decisions made. Or do I lean into learning, and I cannot avoid, because the moment I do that, I am saying that my application is following DDD and it is following an architecture style. So now people looking at my code will be like, well, no, it should look like this. Subtle brag people look at your code. Huh? All events are created with entities because that is where their main responsibilities should be. In real life, when we ask someone's name, he answers himself. Events occur within the entity itself. But if you tell someone to save, they won't understand anything. To get people to look at my projects, usually pulling the teeth a bit. Oh, you're thinking I was like, oh yeah, people look at my code. Sorry, my brain is. No, I guess I'm having an aha moment myself. Is really where it's lying, and I'm trying to think through what it means. Because to follow down this path, right, I have to take on a load of code that I don't understand to start with. If I'm streaming it, I have to be willing to defend it. I have to be willing to discuss it. I might never get challenged, right? But I don't want to promote expertise in an area where I am uncomfortable. But I see the benefits in doing what this is suggesting. But it means that there is only one way of writing software. Once you go down this path, right? There is only one way. And the libraries that I take on push me into that direction. And I get the analogy. Well, I don't know if I agree. That's the problem, Delta. That's is kind of like the analogy is probably one of the most logical analogies I've heard. So, to be honest, the concept of who has the event. Well, I'd be a big hypocrite if I didn't say that I was willing to change, right? Because I know better. I don't know better. There's people who have experienced a lot of different things that have gone into putting that software together. I just want to understand what it means for my software path, my software development. Because if I start down this path, right, I've got to going the way I'm going. There's things I've experienced that I know and understand, right? There's challenges I'm going to face that I know how to overcome or I can work around, right? If I go down the path of following, what is essentially a retooling, right? I don't have much of an option. Well, I suppose I would find the people that are actually very opinionated about my code style. Because I would be basically breaking. Right. But I'm mindful of the fact that my goal is twofold, right? Show development of software, show how, I suppose I'm hitting that right this second, right? I'm demonstrating exactly what is realistic software development, right? The realism that things aren't working quite the way you expect. Now, I can proceed with everything I'm doing, right? I can proceed without doing this. I don't have to tackle this. But if I don't tackle it now, what is the cost later, right? If I've written 6 or 7 of these little projects, right, and I've then decided that I need to do this other thing because I've hit a wall, that is a lot more painful. But this could take me a week to divert onto and rewrite. And also, because of the way my application is structured, right, because it doesn't look like this, I'm doing exactly what I don't like doing, which is just mimicking what someone else does, even though I don't understand why. And again, I'm going to use that word, right? That word domain, which means that I'm moving into that DDD realm. And the clean architecture stuff, yeah, I get that it's not inherently DDD, but it is DDD. So all these concepts merge back together and become, there is only one way of doing it that's agreed upon. And that's not, I don't believe that still. So I have a few options, right? I proceed as I am, and where the library doesn't work, I write workarounds, which means that, and here's the other challenge, right? That with doing that, let's say I hire one of you guys in 3 years' time, the software's actually working, and I hire one of you guys to work on it. You've got experience of working with these other technology stacks, and you've got experience working with that design. Now, my design differs, but it's the same. But it differs in its structure, it differs in its naming. That's harder for you to get your head around because it doesn't fit, but it does fit. Huh. Interceptors are not gonna. Interceptors are kind of. An interceptor in this case would help, right? Where I'm actually trying to do something after save or whatever. Publishing events being one of those things. Interceptors in this will do me nothing right this second, right? Because all I can do, because of the way I'm using this, that saves right there. So if we change the way this works, right? Tenant is not just a set of properties, right? Tenant is my base entity. I can save it, but it is also my base entity. And I add methods on there that represent doing the things to it, right? In your example, so hey, talk. Okay, I'll do a thing. But now my ordering, my structure here is wrong. I've got to change all this. So many concepts. Not what I expected when I took on that dependency of specifications. But it's clearly designed to do a thing. Right? Because again, if I had gone with the traditional way of doing it, my normal way of doing this, right, I wouldn't have experienced this. Because this would not have saved immediately. The fact that this saves immediately is a challenge. Now I could try and essentially wrap a transaction around this, right? Which means I could roll back the saves, but I couldn't roll back the events. And that doesn't change anything. That just makes the code more complicated, more unreadable. So what I'm thinking about is, do I go ahead and create a base entity? Do I put the event on there? Do I then create those events and worry about the structure later? Is it what I want to do? From an architectural standpoint, it makes sense. But it gives me very little freedom, very little control. I have to follow the pattern. Do I need that? Is that the software development? Base entity or entity abstract class contains ID created at last update. Yeah. The implementation doesn't panic me, right? Like that's not what I'm worried about. Right. What? Check out. No, check out. Branch. New branch. Feature. The main problems. I'm not worried about that specifically. So if I create a base class, just to be different, right? Dear. That's not. Yeah. And this has public enumerable domain event, just for the sake of. This also has. There we go. Why am I even worrying? Just let Copilot write it for me as well. Now this inherits from, right? And see, I have an event that is not normal, right? Although there's nothing saying it can't do it, right? So tenant user register add domain event new tenant user created, right? So I'm not event sourcing this, I'm just creating domain events, right? Event sourcing is slightly different again, right? Because event sourcing applies the state. Well, now that's hard. The create is harder because the create has, well, again, extra data. So I need to make everything that could be in that event constructor. So that will work, right? So the difference between this and event sourcing is the aggregate has these played back against it, right? So here I'm going to create a method that publishes when I want to change something. So if I wanted to change the tenant or whatever, I could do. There's no other domain events available here. Pretty sure my database project is completed. Nice. Completed in so much as it's kind of working, but now you've got to refine it, or completed. You've done all the testing and everything. Test just failed. Ouch. Oh yeah. Yeah, that would not be protected. Yeah. I'm thinking through it. I'm not trying to implement it because again, my problem here is so much as I'm going to basically I'm basically going to end up with this up on my screen as I copy and paste all the right parts in there, right? By doing this, I am completely losing my own control. There is only one way of doing this. I'm just challenging for myself that is what I want to do. and it's just an interface now. And because there is only one way. That's the challenge. There is no interpretation here. There is only mimic what is done. I'm not saying it's wrong, by the way. I'm not saying that the fact that it is that structured means that it is a right way to do things. My fear is my objects, my structure. Is this going to organically grow in a way that I'm going to be able to say, yes, I understand what my... Because by putting these events on there, and I get the whole, they're not aggregates, right? I get that. But they are aggregates. In this design, they are aggregates. Right, so I want to make sure that I'm not... Does he do it? Actually, does he do this with aggregates at all? Or is he just using base events here? He's calling it domain. He doesn't. But he has value objects. He's clearly not American. Right, because... But this has massive impact on my organization. This has impact on a lot of things. So I'm just trying to validate that it is where I want to head. So he has application, to-do items, to-do lists, commands, create to-do list. I guess he's not following the same exact pattern. Yes, Jason. Right, this is, yeah, Jason Taylor. He adds, white, sets the entity, he sets the title, and he saves changes. No event off that one. Delete would have an event. He's not using specifications as well. To do item completed, to do item created. Well, to do item created, but to do items, not to do lists. So he actually does expose it and makes it a part of the code. So I get what you're saying there. So in this case, rather than doing it this way, I create a private construct. I make the constructor private and put a static create it on there. Because again, I wouldn't want to like validations and stuff. But that doesn't really change very much there about what that's doing. Ugh. Let's have a look. Let's do a bit of learning here. So, application, domain, infrastructure. So, infrastructure and domain, right? So let's not be afraid. We'll get along. source. Select folder. This is going to be tenant management dot domain. The class library. Okay, and then that's gonna be renamed, right? Because basically, what these are. Oh, hold on. We have some ordering here. So in domain we have the objects, the aggregates, I suppose. The entities, as he's got them called. Again, he's not lent into the whole aggregate thing, whereas the clean architecture from Adalis is fully leaned into aggregates and the whole DDD aspect of it. So I get your point that clean architecture isn't domain-driven design exactly, but they still use the terminology. This is a more pure example. I prefer this example. I appreciate you sending this link because this is more achievable with what I'm doing right this second. Right, the whole moving fully into aggregates is not, because again, I'm not comfortable doing that. Okay, he does a bit of both. This is a little bit inconsistent. Ooh, he actually finds an event when you set the value as well. Huh. That's a... I don't know if I like that. What are your opinions on side effects of toggling a Boolean field? I suppose it's not really. It's a known side effect, I suppose, because you expect it to be marked as done. You want to tell people it's done. It's kind of an expected side effect, but the same is doing something at the same time. So it's not just setting a Boolean value. There's no implicit, no visible behavior there. So he has domain. I'm just trying to find out the ordering of things here, right? Yeah, I wouldn't write like that. Yeah, I'd prefer a method to update as done. So application references domain. Domain references nothing. Infrastructure references application. What? What? Prefer method in full control. Yeah, I prefer the more explicit update as done or mark as done, etc. Because then it has that implied there's something else involved in just marking it as done. Whoa. But why doesn't that have... Okay, I need to draw something. I've got a feeling I might be finding my tablet at some point in this process. Draw prior. Start now. Nice of you to save it. Process flow. No. No. Okay, so new blank diagram. Clean architecture. Okay, I'm trying to what I'm trying to do is get right in my head the order in which these things are going to happen, right? For the purpose of, I'm about to test a refactor of this. I think this would probably count as pretty much my ultimate, hey, I'm going to refactor and change things, right? So we have application, we have domain, we have infrastructure. So right now, if we're aligning these the way my brain is thinking, I'm going to close this sample down because I don't think we're getting back to that right a second. My application layer is tenant management is my application layer essentially right now, right? That is what I'm doing there, right? This is more I don't like the blurring here, so no, that's definitely not. No, hold on. This and this are technically my application layer. So these two combined are my application layer in that design, right? What they've got in here is the commands and handlers, all inside of this. Right? So this is within application. Common, okay, that makes sense as a naming. We've got an interface around our DB context. Because he's not using the Agile stuff, right? So he's using straight up DB context. And we have an interface that we can pass around as application DB context, so we can override that. Models here are DTOs, right? So essentially, this and this are my application layer in that design, which makes this my domain, kind of. Yeah. Domain, according to this layout, is more these, right? These are, let's call them entities. Let's drag that there. It's going to break everything, by the way. I'm just trying to align mentally. So that makes this infrastructure, right? So application, infrastructure, and domain, right? Tests, we're going to create tests. We're going to move that out. That's noise. So if that's infrastructure, that's domain, that's application. These two form application together, right? I get that. Okay, so now let's talk about associations and get over that hump. In this example, application has a dependency on domain, right? So application has a dependency on domain. If you disagree with my ordering of arrows, let me know. Domain has 0 dependencies. Infrastructure has a dependency on application. Infrastructure, I keep forgetting that it's in the same tab. Infrastructure has a DB context. But to do item and to do list item are referenced there, which means that this is solely depending upon an implicit reference, right? Because application takes a dependency on domain. I've totally bought this now. Right. And infrastructure takes now references. Oh, this is backwards. This is totally backwards to how I've got it so far. Yeah, produces circular dependency. Because that now can't reference. Actually, hold on. That's because it's got a reference to the wrong thing. Irrelevant results. Projects. That cannot reference data anymore. Right? But that references domain. Be interested to know how many of you have attempted trying to do this on an application before. That's weird. Application takes a dependency on domain, infrastructure takes a dependency on application. That ordering is weird. Because that's so backwards. So if this is infrastructure, right? Okay. Thank you again for the share. Independent of frameworks, testable, independent of UI, independent of database, independent of anything external. But the ordering. Oh, well, I guess I'll be a little bit better off when I do this. This is about to be very painful, though. So, these are getting. Watch. These are implicit models, right? So, this will work. So, I suppose this is the difference over a traditional N tier, in that I am now my layers are a little bit less obvious. Okay, so we have data building, or I don't know if that's let's do it properly. Let's commit infrastructure. Cannot rename. You're no fun. Edit. Right, tools. Project. Download project. Open in Explorer. First, you don't succeed. Oh, you really don't like that. Whole solution. It will not let me rename that folder. What did I do to you? Why won't you let me rename it? Hey, Amwin. How you doing? It's going well. Going well. I'm breaking everything right this second. Nope. Prototypes. Project next. Liquid Sky. I think this is a bit beyond the Why won't you let me name that? It's opening another program. What have I got it opening? I suppose it doesn't really matter for the purpose of this, right? It doesn't. It's not going to hurt me to keep calling it infrastructure, even though it's data. It's just visually, I want to make sure that obvious difference is there. But let's worry about the actual ordering of things first. Existing project source. So glad you joined today, Essa. Turned my world upside down. I was happily going to just create some simple thing in entity framework. Everything's going to be nice and easy. And yeah. I guess we get to learn a different set of things, right? Like how to apply these concepts in reality in an application that's more than just one simple project. And how to keep it there as well. That's going to be the bigger challenge, by the way. The biggest challenge is not doing this. This is just a refactoring. I'm not intimidated by this. I'm more just frustrated with the ordering of things, because I'm going to have to rethink how I approach some of these things. The bigger challenge is how to maintain this. Some interfaces may be within the domain. Right, we're going to learn those things, right? And there's, as I think it was Ardalis, there's shared kernel, right? This doesn't have that concept because this is a layering, right? Actually, one of the things I was watching, complete diversion here, Milan was looking at the other week. In one of his videos, he mentioned it, and this confused me. Railway-oriented programming. He had a video up, and he was looking at railway-oriented programming. And his code looked very strange. Just as a diversion. We'll whack that in random chat, just for the sake of it. There you go. There's a rabbit hole to go down. But it came up in one of these, yeah. Yeah, so we may end up with shared kernel, I think. And that's really what this folder is. Shared. This is kind of where shared kernel comes from, I suppose. So I think right now we're gonna lean into that shared. There's no harm in that one because it has no dependencies itself. It can only, this we're gonna have to look at. Okay, so this is a problem. Okay, we have enough. We don't have enough. We need mediator in there. Tell me you're not doing that. Did you add? Yes, you did. Okay, you're just whining. We're gonna need. We'll worry about actual things later. Domain event. The reason being, the iDomain event is going to be a I notification from mediator, and that's an interface, not a class. Because again, I don't know how to use a keyboard. This, again, I think this goes in the shared kernel for right this second. Entities, entity base. Is that what I called it? Yes, okay. This is iDomain event. iDomain event. No. iDomain event. Why is that unreachable? Never null. Oh, because that can't be null. That's why that is. So by there, do that. What don't you like about that? Hi, CompileDev. How are you? What am I working on? Right now, I'm working on breaking my project. Oh, it's because it's not a list. That's why. Okay. No. So, I have been working on a project to do to create an agile management platform for the last couple of months. Basically, tools like Jira, Trello, things like that are really meant to help aid in work organization stuff. So, having worked in those sorts of tools for many years, I have some opinions on what they're lacking. So I am attempting to build my own platform. And along the way, sharing with Stream the challenges of writing larger scale applications, struggles with design, struggles with things I have to learn. Just because I've been doing this for many years doesn't mean I know everything, which this stream is actually proving very useful for. So I started the stream with the goal of introducing events into our save process. So when we actually save something, we publish the events, because right now there's some workflows that are inherently risky, because if they actually fail or roll back, events will still have published to say these things happened when they're actual lies. My stream improves what I don't know every time. Yeah, I mean, I think that if you're a developer and you ever believe that you've finished learning, then you're lying to yourself, right? There's things that I do day to day. There's practices that I've picked up that are just natural to me. And after 20 something years of doing this, I still want to make sure that I'm pushing myself. And, I've been lucky enough to get a group of people come into chat, time and time again, even watching this, that don't mind the fact that I struggle, or I'm learning something. So you know, it's fun. Streaming is fun, but challenging. So today we're kind of now going down a bit of a rabbit hole in kind of a re-engineering of the architectural layers to see if we can introduce some better concepts for doing this eventing. And it's going to be a little bit of a challenge, but we're going to get there. So yeah. I agree. I'd love to share the joy and pain of folks streaming. We journey with you alone. Yeah. No, I appreciate it. I've been in your stream. I know that. What were you doing last time? Oh, you haven't streamed in a little while. Oh, your videos say 3 months, but your recent broadcast 9 days ago. Okay. What were you doing? Swift. Yes. Yeah, I've never really been in the Apple ecosystem, so Swift is something I haven't looked at. Last time I did Apple, it was with any Apple development was an iPhone 1. That's always good when things work. That's always good when things work. Yeah. Maybe application DB context interface and application layer, application DB context class and infrastructure, for example. Of course, it may not be used in something called iApplication DB context. In the Jason Taylor example, there was a DB set definition in the interface. This is why people are escaping from object-oriented program to functional. Yeah. Yeah, we're gonna hit some certain challenges in doing this, but again, hopefully this is useful for people, right? So let's go. So entity base, right? We'll worry about where the event lives in a minute. So we now have, we're working towards getting our domain. Again, I'm still scared of using the word domain, but we'll get there. Entity base. So in entity base, we're overriding ID, right? Right now we've still got created app. We're gonna have to do some standardizing of our objects here. This is going to cause a bit of a problem. We do have last updated though, so that's good. User, tenant user, that's that error. Tenant address, entity base, so we don't need that anymore. Tenant is entity base. And last updated. Yeah, we're gonna have to do some database scripts at some point. Entity base. Now most of these won't necessarily have any problems, right? A lot of these objects are just they're kind of value in so much as they are associated with other things, but the main entities. So if we go back to, and I'm going to stick using Jason Taylor's example, even though our Dallas clean architecture one is a little bit more fully featured, because this is closer to what I have, right? I can work around simple to my use case, whereas I can't work out. I don't want to go spending time trying to figure out how to pull out the weeds of the aggregates, etc. Even if this example might end up being a little bit more simplistic than I would hope for. So our domain has our entities. It also has our events, right? This is where this is going to get even weirder. Now, one thing I do like about this is it does kind of put some structure around what these are. These aren't, I know these are notifications underneath, but these are events in our domain, I suppose, which we kind of were leaning into already. What I'm going to have to do is figure out how to make this. So these can be iDomain event. We don't need orchestrated notification right this second. That is a Saga concern, which we don't actually currently use, so that's fine. I'd rather remove that now and take that lie out of there. So this is an iDomain event. An iDomain event is iNotification by default, right? So that's okay. Which means we don't need them. We don't need that. So as always, the way I run the stream is if you are interested in what I'm doing, if you have any questions on what I'm doing, feel free to ask, to talk. You know, I don't have any issues. I'm not trying to yeah. That tenant user is really bugging you, right? Just the design there. I get the pattern, yeah. But yeah, if the stream is not necessarily about getting things done all the time, it's about making sure that I'm, you know, I'm learning, but also if anyone else is learning from what I'm doing, are able to ask questions. So I have no issue with being corrected or directed, as long as I agree with what I'm doing. So let's do what you suggested now. So the suggestion is we do this, right? Yeah. So as Ezra is sharing in the Discord, you're more than welcome to join the Discord as well, because of links and all the information that we've kind of covered this stream already. So the suggestion is to do something like this, right? Where we are that's the problem, that being that. We kind of don't want to do that. We don't need that because we're not setting the ID here. We're doing that because the database will give us the ID internally. Kani, welcome. An ad break just ran as well. How are you doing? Hi, Hannah's Panda. How are you doing? How was your stream? I was looking. Fine, get everything done I wanted to get done in this round. Kenku is eating the emotes now. Nice. Nice. 10 years we've registered. I'm not sure that's actually the right event now, but we'll come back on that second. Return user. Okay, so additional domain business rules for creating the object can also be added here. Yes. So I'm good. I'm good. I'm learning. I'm building software. This stream has flown by quicker than I would have liked. So, yeah. But yes, I am having a fun time. So, yeah, I agree. the benefit of following this pattern is definitely one of control, right? You can't just create a new tenant user, and also side effects in constructors are just generally not a good thing. So having this event published from an explicit create is more intent, and I get it, yeah. Which does get me to grid tenant identifier string company name. It's time to make them a little bit more friendly. Hey Grumpy, how you doing? That's not a tenant identifier though. You are fine. Good. Fine's good. And herein lies the problem of refactoring. You start to realize the dependencies you've created, and doing it this way is not going to be as easy as you would have hoped. So tenant was registered. No, that's tenant user was registered. That's a different thing though, but that's still the same problem. Hi Banks, how's it going? Not bad, not bad. Oh. Refactoring, the time when you really learn how janky your code is. Yep, that's exactly what I just hit. It's also a time when you have to worry about was that a link, Canny, to your stream? So Canny is developing some stream stuff, which is really cool. He's got an overlay and a little character running around, and the overlay collapses on itself, and the emotes fly everywhere. Yes, I block links. Sorry. Although you subbed, I should look into if that's possible to remove from subscribers. But either way, there. Okay. So this does bring up a problem, right? In terms of workflow. So when I publish the event, yeah, I don't want to publish internal identifiers, right? So the event, the object itself, stores one thing, but the yet again, I'm going to hit a problem of my design or my desire to write this the way I want to write it. It gives me flexibility, but doesn't fit well with other patterns. Data store leaking into the business layer. Well, my event, I don't publish. These are domain events. These don't actually matter. I'm publishing GUIDs, right? And those GUIDs are the publicly shared information. But this is a domain event, which I'm really going to regret calling that. So this can be the internal, right? So I differentiate between ID and identifier, right? In so much as I do that. Int tenant ID, int user ID. I'll show you how I use it in a minute. String password. There's a reason, I promise. Equals tenant ID equals user ID equals password. So the problem was that, right, where I have the if I'm using the publicly if I'm using the publicly shared GUIDs internally, then I have then I can't use them in here because this doesn't know about those public GUIDs necessarily. Without referencing the navigational properties, but this doesn't know about the navigational properties yet because this is being created. But again, I still have another issue in that tenant user was registered. I don't want to store the password. So the way this works is when I when I add a user, I associate it with a tenant. I publish the event that a tenant user was created. That's a pretty graphic description there, Kenny. Thank you very much for the raid. I appreciate it. Okay. I publish the event with a password because I don't care about the password in my application. I publish it so that the provider can register the user with the provider being auth0. But now I'm going to rethink even that. Because should these events have any, these should be things that are triggering. I'm not using them for event sourcing. I'm using them for triggering other things in my application, right? So the subscriber to this, right? This does tenant user was registered. Right now, I turn around, I go and grab the user. So I can still publish that information, right? But this one, I now have to go and gather that information. Again, not challenging. But there's one more that's a challenge, and that is in users. So the users subscribes to tenant user was registered. And this use case is, hey, I want to register that user. So I can still go and get, the internal, the user identifier, etc. Still, that's not the challenge. The challenge is that password, right? This is invoked based upon that event firing. So once I've saved the user to the database, I will then do this. So I've got a disconnect. Do I save the password? No, I can't do. So how do I get around this? All operations are performed within the handler within the application because this is a business rule. Right, but I don't want to register this user unless I've actually added them to my database. So how do I get around that? Because I don't want to store the password. That's just bad practice all around, right? I don't even want to temporarily store the password if I can avoid it. So the way this works is, if I go to the workflow, the registered tenant workflow registers a new tenant, which saves the address and everything else like that, because this is one user commit, right? One user message. Then once it's registered the user, it goes to register. Once it's registered the tenant and the address, it then registers the user. And that, right, the second sends a command to register the new tenant, register new tenant user, sorry, and then publishes the event internally that the user was registered. That user registered is then picked up here, but that password never gets passed into the tenant user because it's never stored. Because I'm publishing this event in an environment where I have that password right now, because the register new tenant workflow actually passes that password in. So this is not wholly in control of the tenant user. I have no issue with making it pass around the internal IDs. That's not a problem. The events, as they are internal to this area, are fine to be that way. But that's the sticking point, because I can't do that. So again, this is exactly why, it's great to have, here's how to do this, but this is when software breaks, right? This is when all the design patterns and all the methods in the world aren't going to necessarily have a clean answer, right? Because if I'm following this exactly as is, then that piece of information there has to be passed through, but it can't be passed through because it has no concept. Now, it would be wrong of me to make the tenant user take the password just to publish that event. I think that would be a lie, because that suggests the tenant user has the password, but it doesn't ever care about the password. The tenant user is actually just an association record. But other things do depend upon it. So how does that work? How do I do this? I have two sets of information that need to come together again to then do something else. Do I change my workflow? Do I change my entire design there? I can't throw my hands up and say it's not possible. It's something I need to do, right? I need to be able to set a password. To be honest, it was starting to feel, in my opinion, register new tenant should be a single command, and the operation should be completed in the handle of this command without calling in the command. How so? It still doesn't get around this problem, even if I do it in one. Right? The workflow thing is just a way of me. They can. I agree. Register new tenant is actually several things coming together. That's not the actual issue here. The fact that I've wrapped in a workflow is because I do want this behavior to be independently testable. If registered, so again, if we get into clean code and we get into all that, if I put all that behavior inside of register new tenant, right? So if this class alone says, okay, does the tenant exist? Okay, no, add the tenant, add the repository, add the user, set the password, all that. This method is already, pretty long. We get into that realm of what's good design there, right? And again, this is testable. Workflow was just a concept I introduced to try and help say these things are linked. You have to do these two together to register a new tenant, but they're not always independent, because I actually use register tenant user from the API as well, right? Because when I'm registering a new tenant user, it also does that, right? And that creates a user in my database, just a record with an email, and associates it with a tenant, and then publishes this event, which then goes and registers it with Auth0. And again, the idea there is the password is never in my database. So those two things, there may be separate services within a handler that perform operations. Well, that's what it's doing. But I don't want to do this until it's happened. But we get into the problem, right? I hope that the problem is apparent in that this is where the patterns don't necessarily fit neatly what my goal is. So is my goal wrong? Which after today, I'm starting to think that, there's only one way of writing software properly. Everything else just is hacked together. Is my goal incorrect here, or is my actual use case valid, and I just need to learn how to apply this technique? Oh. This is where we get into, is it just made up, right? Any normal developer, right? Any developer that's coming across this and trying to mimic what they see in these clean architecture examples, right? Doesn't come up against this use case while they're doing something simple like this, right? But once they get into actual business rules, once they get actually into implementing things, that's the measure. Where does it fall apart, or where do you struggle? And those lessons aren't in here. Right? Those lessons are not in this code base or these examples. They are going to be hard learned lessons. And that's, again, why my fear of doing this is, because the moment I start to apply this, opinions can be had upon my structure, my naming, everything else, because I don't apply the rules 100%. But then what do we do here? Product department will always say the use case is valid. Well, the use case is valid. So the way this is actually currently working, right? Again, my goal for this project is not to start with the UI, is to start with the APIs, right? I want to focus solely on that. So this is my endpoint for registration, right? So this is registering a tenant. So I have a company name, a person name, an email, and a password, right? And a confirmed password, right? And then an address. What this does is it creates one record for this tenant. It creates one record for this user. It creates one record for this address. It creates associating records for address to tenant and user to tenant. It then publishes an event which then says, okay, I've got all the information I need. Go ahead and actually register this user with Auth0. So this information is then used through the Auth0 API to register a user. Right? If I'm going to sign up for a system, this is exactly what I want to do. Right? I want to be able to say, hey, here's my details, etc. but this piece of information should never be in my system. So I could leverage the saga concept, right? Where I have something that triggers the saga. I'm unclear what problem you're having. Password. Right, if I start to make things entity-based and I publish events from within an entity, right? So this entity is tenant user. I call create. I have a domain event that publishes. When I hit save, that will then publish this event, right? Because then as soon as I commit this entity, the event will be published, tenant user was registered, because it's actually saved in the database. Password is not a concept, is not a concern of tenant user. It's not a concern of user, right? I'm going to have to do something similar in here potentially, right? It's not a concern of user. User is just email for my system. This event fires, right? This tenant user was registered event fires right now. And on that event, I publish the IDs of the user and the tenant and the password. It's a concern of auth0. That's all I care about. But it's through my workflow. But I don't want to call auth0 until my workflow is completed. So I don't want to store the password. I don't want to pass the password around unnecessarily. I want to make sure the password is just passed to auth0, which I was doing in this because the current workflow for this looks like, okay, register a tenant user, now publish the event. And the password was passed into this one. But if I make eventing a concern of the entities themselves, and my entities don't ever touch the password, then I either have to pass the password into an entity artificially, which seems wrong, or figure out some way of getting that to auth0 separately. More vaguely, is it a concern of the thing that deals? Yeah. Yeah. So I have a user registration system, user registration interface, right? That's what this does, right? I inject a user registry. I actually define user registry in here because I don't care about it in my actual application. I just know that I can register a user. So, yeah, the auth0 registry in this case is an implementation on my actual API layer. But ultimately, the idea there is that I do not store or use the password in my system, in my code. And doing the events this way prevents me from doing that. Because I either have to store it, or I have to come up with some other way of notifying. It's kind of like, okay, when this workflow is completed, now go do that. But that shouldn't happen unless I know that these saved exactly. So again, it's kind of, it benefits from being on an event. Yeah. Yeah, right now. But moving these events inside of entities means that I lose that ability. Because I'm not passing data into an entity to then just forward it in an event, because that's even messier. So do I break apart? Do I have a notification here that says this is completed? And then again, kind of saga-like, publish that. So if I do it, right, if I hear and say, okay, publish workflow completed notification, right? Oh, not a domain, not a domain event, but then combined with this one, because that one could be past the password, then combined with this event. So the go make a tenant sandwich task is really multiple tasks, which, well, first we register the tenant, which is adding the tenant record and adding the address record. Then we register a user and assign them to the tenant. And then we publish an event. Or then we register the user with auth0 once those pieces are done. But, okay. Oops. Putting. So make a tenant user, make a security principal, tie tenant user to security principal. Oh. So change the order I do things and redesign what I'm doing. Oh, thank you very much. Thank you for the Prime sub. But you still get the ad. It punishes you. And it doesn't tell me about Prime subs, by the way. I'll see the badge. Not that you can hear me until 30 seconds from now. Oh, there we go. That's interesting. Did you get back in now? Now you told me about it? I'm back. Okay. Well, thank you very much for the Prime sub. I appreciate that. Unless you actually announce it, I don't think it actually lets me know that someone's Prime subbed. Because I've seen that I've got some subs and they're Prime subs, and it never told me in the stream. So if you don't announce it, I don't think it told me at all. Anyway, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Yep. Just to get out the ad. Anyway, so the reason I'm doing it the way I'm doing it now is because I use the identifier I create when I register the user in my system as my identifier within auth0, which gives me the benefit of I can control the ID, which means that I don't need to worry about auth0 tracking an auth0 ID. If I flip the workflow, I now have to fit auth0's ID into something. So yeah, I have identifier. So I differentiate identifier and ID, right? So I have, when I create a user, I have an identifier as well as the ID, right? So this I can pass around internally. That's fine, right? But this is what I use to refer to this thing. So when I'm working in different systems, if I'm working in work items, right, they never get the internal ID. They get the publicly shared identifier of the thing that I'm talking about, right? They should all be populated, by the way. So I can have the same object represented in different databases using that identifier. And if I control the identifier, then I call auth0 with that identifier, right? And I tell them that's my ID, and they just whack auth0 pipe on the front of it. But if I switch that, then I have to make my provider responsible for giving me my identifier back to store. I don't mind it. It doesn't have to be a GUID, right? As long as it's a unique identifier. It's just more, I gotta now track that. But it fixes the problem. So to S's point earlier on, the service would be the auth0 piece. Because the way that would work would be in here, I would say user provider register. It would give me back ID equals await provider dot register user blah, and then in here that changes to be parameter. That changes to be user identifier. Now, the irony here is we have the user. This goes away. The way this works is we go var user tenant user equals tenant user dot create, and we have tenant dot id user dot id and tenant dot id, and then we add that, and then we do tenant user. But the irony is, with that gone, with that password requirement gone, there's no event necessary. Then everybody wins. My software's on the floor crying. Okay. So I think I have some rework to do, no matter what. I think that I'll commit to doing this. It's gonna be difficult though. So, yeah. But I have hit 3 hours. So, I think it is a unfortunate time for me to call it a stream here. Now, output of this stream, the events are a good idea, without a doubt. I don't disagree with the events. I don't disagree with anything I'm necessarily doing. It's important to understand that, you know, if you're going to write software, you really have to assess the technologies you're going to use and any implications that has. So by using the Agile specification library, right, I took on something that made writing queries and actually getting data out and saving data look much cleaner. But with it came a challenge in that now it will trigger save. I'm going to have to do some engineering around the DB context. If nothing else, events work as telemetry, which has value in troubleshooting easier. Yeah. Well, publishing events for the sake of publishing events, I gotta be careful. But this does put into place a better structure for doing that. What it does do, what this has done, is kind of meant that I'm going to have to reorganize my code. I'm going to have to rethink how I do certain things, as identified here, which means that, I have other issues there. But I will commit. I will do it, and I will post an update. I'll probably get some time today to do some of this. I just can't stream much longer because I have 2 pups to actually go walk. So, yeah, that was this isn't exactly where I wanted to be, but it is where I am, and it's the reality of software dev, right? You've got to, yeah, they're barking now, so it's time to go. So, no one else is up and streaming. So, I'm going to finish up here. I'm just going to end. I'm going to get going. I will be back again on Monday, maybe. Monday is New Year's Day. I'm not sure if that's a viable stream time, but we'll see. I will provide updates in Discord after the stream channel to any progress I make on this. Thank you very much for the raid. Thank you very much for the sub, Grumpy. Appreciate it. So thank you very much for all your assistance and your resources and your continued. You're helping drive me towards learning and growing my knowledge and not being scared of going too far beyond where I currently am. Right. So I don't mind the challenge. This will be worth it. I'm certain of that. So thank you very much all. Have a great rest of your weekend. Have a happy new year if we don't see each other again around Twitch. And yeah, take care all. Have a good one.